guys, I'm here with my new Templar build for PvP, and it's quite exciting. It's a build that I've been playing for quite a while, and I've been using it quite extensively, and I think this is the masterpiece of what all my previous stamina builds have been leading up to. Now, before I start with this build, I'm going to go over what this build can and can't do. Can you use this build effectively in PvP? Yes. Is it good for solo roaming? Yes. Is it good for 1vx? Yes. Is it good for group combat? Yes, it can be really good for group combat. All of these different styles of play you adjust to while you're playing them, but this build can be incredibly effective for all of them. Can you use this build in PvE? Yes, you can, but some adjustments might need to be made to it. For regular PvE, this build will not only function well, it'll actually function extremely well in comparison to other builds. But the downside of it is that if you're going to do a dungeon or if you want to do trials with this build, it won't work as well. You might need to make an adjustment to crank up your DPS just a little bit higher, which is totally possible. If you make a PvE version of this build, you can achieve 1.1, 1.2k DPS with this stamina build, which is quite good. At least that's what I've been able to do. I'm sure someone will be able to take this build and make a better adjustment to crank out even more DPS with it. Anyway, let's get right to it. Okay, so we're going to start with our stats, buffs, regen, foods, and pots. Now, we're going to go with our stats first. You can see where I have my attributes here. That's not too terribly important. What's important is the mix between where your attributes are and the bonuses that your gear give you, because you want to have these values filled out in the right set here. So my max magicka is at 1500 for this build, and that is perfectly fine. You don't need more magicka than that for this build. I am in my own PvP campaign right now, so my health is 250 hit points higher than it would normally be if I wasn't on my home campaign. My max stamina is 2,418, which is just below the soft cap of 2,419. I didn't want to go over soft cap with it because the Templar really does benefit from high max health if you're using Blazing Shield, which this build does use. Okay, so now we're going to look at our recoveries. My magicka recovery is 98, my health recovery is 80, and my stamina is 153. Those are all super huge recovery numbers, and you could crank those much higher with this build if you wanted to. You just have to make a few adjustments to it. Now, the reason that they are so high is because of the set bonuses I use and because of the recovery bonuses that I stack, and we'll get into that a little bit later. My spell damage is at 97, which is as low as it can get. I am on my own PvP server, so it's higher than it would normally be, but that's not important. We don't use spells with this build. The only spells you're using is a Purify and Blazing Shield. My weapon damage is 195 out of 195 with my bow, so I do get a bonus with that from being in my own PvP home server, but when I switch to my greatsword it gets to 209 plus 17 out of 195. And if you use momentum with your greatsword, you can crank that even higher up to 228. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. If you want to run a high bursty stamina build, why is my weapon damage not as high as it could be? Well, there's reasons for that. It's because this build is with the idea of landing a good combo for your burst and sustaining yourself in prolonged combat by having your high regens. So yeah, my weapon damage isn't low, but it's not as high as it could be. I could crank it up to 270 to hit really hard if I really wanted, but I think it's more beneficial to learn the combos and rely on being able to sustain yourself a little bit as opposed to cranking out 5-10% more damage. So if you look at the armor and the spell resistance on this build, they're both pretty even, just around 1600 each. Now I do run a movable with this build, and you should have a movable up at almost all times. And if you do, your armor and your spell resistance will soft cap, and they'll be just over 2,300, which is really great. That's a huge damage mitigation there, and I'll show you why that's so important in just a little bit. Now, if we're looking at the boons that we got, I've got the Atronach boon. That's from my Mundus Stone, so this increases my magicka recovery. Remember how I said I was stacking my recoveries? This is part of it there. Then I've got Lycanthropy. I am a werewolf. Something that a lot of people may not know is that while you're in human form, if you get hit by any poison abilities or anything, you don't actually take bonus damage from them. You only get the negative sides of being a werewolf when you're actually in werewolf form. So if you're in human form, you get the passive plus 15% stamina recovery, which is part of my regen build then again, but I don't get any bonuses from being in werewolf form. In fact, I also give allies a bonus to their ultimate generation if they're werewolves and around me as well. So it's just a plus to have. I mean, you can't go wrong with having werewolf on your character if you don't want to be a vampire. As for my food buff, I'm running the increase all primary stats, so that's the best food you can get in the game at this time. So it increases your max health, magicka, and stamina, and it actually only increases your health by the 385. It's just a bug in the tooltip. Your magicka and stamina are only increased by around 240, I believe, maybe 300, I'm not sure. But it's not as much as it says in the tooltip. As for potions for this build, you don't actually need potions to play this build. You can actually use it in PvP perfectly fine without potions. Your stamina sustain is quite impressive, so is your magicka sustain. So it's not like you need any. If you do want to go use potions, just crappy old stamina potions work more than fine. You'll actually find them being incredibly effective. If you want to go for the weapon power pots so you can hit a little harder, that's one of my things that I like to do, then those work really well as well. If you want to use the tri-pots, you can use that too. They might feel a little bit wasteful because you don't really need the magicka unless you're really blowing through your blazing shields, but you know, it's just to my playstyle that I don't use the blazing shields as often to have to blow through all my magicka that fast. But I would think that the tri-pots would be the best potion option for any build in PvP at least. So now we're going to take a look at the gear, and we're going to go over a little bit of that regen thing I was telling you about and why that's so important for this build. I'm actually running a 5-piece Willow's Path set. If you look at the 5-piece bonus on the Willow's Path set, it says increase all regeneration in combat by 15%. Now, I'm going to explain how I get so much regen with this build and why I haven't even cranked it as high as it could go, because it could go much, much higher. So, if you look at my race here, I am a Nord. So what do I get from Nord? I get my racial passive Nord skills. Robust. Increase health recovery while in combat by 30%. Awesome. I have Repentance slotted on both bars. Increase health and stamina regeneration by 15%. Awesome. And then on top of that, I've got the Willow's Path set on, so I get another 15% bonus. So my health bonuses while in combat are increased by 60%. So when I'm in combat, my stamina recovery is even higher with its bonuses than my health recovery. I've got 6 pieces of medium armor on and 1 piece of heavy. So we're looking at 24% increased stamina recovery from my 6 medium armor. Now let's go to my Repentance, so another 15% on top of that. Plus the Willow's Path is another 15% on top of that. So we're looking at 54%. And then finally, the passive Werewolf that I get while in human form with absolutely no disadvantage, another 15% on top of that. So that's right, we have the magic number of 69% increased stamina recovery while in combat. Now we're just going to continue to go over my gear here. So for my Willow's Path, I've got the jack, I've got a belt, I've got boots, I've got gloves, and then both my weapons are Willow's Path as well. For my rings, I'm running a four-piece Shadow Walker with the legs to match my ring set. So I've got the pendant and 2 bands. I like the bands more because they have the robust enchant on them, which is a lot better than the healthy enchant. The pendant unfortunately only comes in healthy enchant, so I had to make peace with that. And then I've got the legs here. So on my pendant, I've got 18 stamina recovery, and then on my 2 rings, I have 2 stamina cost reductions. Now this is part of the reason why this build is so sustainable with stamina, because my stamina costs are quite decreased with super high regeneration. And I'll just go over how much that decrease is in a little bit. So then we look at my last 2 pieces of gear, which are my helmet and my shoulders. So I actually did a lot of the new dungeons. It is up to you what you want to put for these last 2 pieces here. I haven't found a complete helm and shoulder from the new Undaunted dungeons, but currently I'm running the Bloodspawn Mask for the stamina recovery, and then I'm running a Scourger's Pauldrons. And that's just for the huge health bonus that it gives there. And they both are 1-piece sets, which is really cool. It's a really nice thing to have. It's quite a big bonus on your character, and not to mention, they look really awesome. What my plan is for this build, once it's fully finished, something that I don't know how long it'll take me to do because the shoulder drops are quite rare from dungeons, is I want to get the 2-piece Bloodspawn set. And the reason I want that is because I want to stack all this armor flat reductions. So remember how I said I was Nord? Well, the Nord passive, once you have your Nord tree maxed out, gives you 6% decreased incoming damage. Now I use Immovable, and you remember how high my armor and spell resistance values were with Immovable up. Well, if I have this set, it gives me a 6% chance on hit, which you get hit a lot when you're in PvP, to gain 770 armor and spell resistance for 6 seconds. Now, that's only just under 400 armor and spell resistance while you're in combat because of the soft caps. So I'll be sitting at around 2,700 armor spell resistance, which is really good actually. That's approaching hard cap. That's quite a high number. And then finally it restores 25 ultimate. Now this is where a big part of this build comes in and why you can kind of go through a tank phase and really burst people down with it. We've got Empowering Sweep slotted as our ultimate. So I have Flawless Dawnbreaker on my Greatsword side, but I don't actually use Flawless. I just like it for the passive 13% damage increase. That's huge. And your Greatsword is your burst weapon, whereas your bow will be your utility weapon for this build. When using Empowering Sweep, it does a fairly decent amount of damage and hits all the people around you. So it's not a bad offensive move at all, but what we really key in here for is that 15% damage reduction. Stack that on with our 6% damage reduction. So that's a minimum of 21% damage reduction when you use that skill and you don't hit any targets. You can increase it more if you hit more people. And because that stacks with our Nord passive. So we throw that on top of our super high armor value, and you're going to be taking 30% incoming damage just around there when you have all these buffs up, assuming that I had my full Bloodspawn set. But it's not quite as high as that now. I'm sitting at about 35% incoming damage when I'm fully buffed. But that's still super nice. You throw up a Blazing Shield and you just jump in, and you'll find yourself incredibly hard to be taken down by quite a few people for those 8 seconds that all those buffs are active. Alright, and finally, the last part of the gear and the importance of the survivability of this build is our reduction in costs. With this build, you're going to find yourself using a lot of things like Dodge Roll, CC Break maybe. You're going to have a movable up all the time. Your stamina costs are going to be quite high. All your skills, majority of your skills, are going to cost stamina. Now, what do we have to offset that huge increase in cost? We have, first of all, Repentance. If you take an opponent down, you get to, for free, pull stamina and health out of their body. Great skill. I wish it scaled off your max stamina, not magic cuts, so that's why my Repentance isn't as strong as a mage's Repentance would be. But because it is such a good way to offset once you kill an opponent, especially if you're in an outnumbered fight or if you're in a big Zerg fight, you can pull all your resources back into you and you can escape. So Repentance being our first part of our resource management, we're going to look at our armor. Our medium armor is going to give us a nice reduction in cost through the Windwalker here. So we get an 18% reduction in cost because we get 3% per piece of medium armor. So from our class skills, we also have our Balanced Warrior, so we have another 4% reduced cost there. So we're sitting at 22% reduced cost. Now with our weapons out, two-handed and bow, assuming you've maxed out your trees, you're going to have a 20% reduced cost in both of those as well. That is a 42% reduced cost for all stamina costing skills. So these two rings will bring down your original cost of the skill by about 40, and then you'll get your 42% cost reduction. So we have quite a bit decreased cost. Now something a lot of people don't know is that reduce the cost of stamina abilities actually includes every ability that uses stamina in the game. Even if it's something like blocking, it will reduce the cost of your blocks, it will reduce the cost of your dodge roll, it will reduce the cost of your CC breaks. That is huge. Those are probably some of the best enchants you can have on your rings. One of the things I was contemplating is actually dropping my recovery even more and putting more into the reduced cost of my stamina skills, and it's just because that dodge roll cost, I roll so much with this build, and I really love the reduced cost in dodge roll. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at the final bit of this build, and that's the skills that we use. This build has a few things in mind. Number one, you want to be able to stay alive with it. So you don't want to die right away. You want to be able to dodge attacks. You want to be able to reduce a lot of your incoming damage. And we've been over that with some of the flash reductions that we have with the build. But what do you do when those aren't up? You dodge roll, you keep a movable up, you can keep your rally up, you can keep your purifying ritual up. So we're going to go over the defensive skills of this build. So first off, we have Empowering Sweep slotted on our bow here. Now, we talked about the flat damage reduction, fantastic skill to use. This is pretty much the only ultimate I will use in combat while using this build, and it's just because of the passive bonus from it. I really like it. Then we have Unstoppable. I picked Unstoppable because I am wearing one heavy piece, so I get that slight little bit increase to the duration of my Unstoppable, but pretty much if you keep Unstoppable up with this build, the amount of stamina that you have, you will be unCCable. So you, like, your opponents will just not be able to CC you ever, and that is such a great thing. You can fight anything, even a hard CC Dragon Knight, and they will not be able to hold you down. You can dance around them. Purifying Ritual. That is your Purify. Removes 5 negative effects from self. Templars have the best Purify in the game. Even though it only affects you, your allies have to activate the synergy for it. It is still the best Purify in the game. And that's why I have it slotted there. And it is absolutely essential for PvP, especially with the amount of lethal arrows around right now. Repentance. Obviously, I'm slotting it for the passive and to pull the resources from a corpse, so this is really just a sustained skill all in all. So if we switch to the Greatsword, we're going to look at the 3 skills on this side as well. Blazing Shield. You guys all know what this skill does. Makes the big shield, it returns the damage done. Fantastic skill. Definitely a Templar mainstay. Rally. This is also a really great skill to have. It puts the passive heal. If you look at it here for me, it's 68, but when I activate it, because my weapon damage gets higher, we'll be sitting at 71 hit points returned every 2 seconds. Mix that with my really high health recovery of 80, and I can sit in a ring where I'm getting 60 health every 2 seconds, but that gets even higher because of the Templar bonuses for sitting in that ring. So for this build, it's actually possible to stack almost 300 hit points every 2 seconds if you set up all your regens right, and then you can hide under an immovable and blazing shield. So by no means is this build as squishy as the previous glass builds you've seen me play. It hits just as hard, but now I have survivability. I can stay in that fight and I can tank people way more than I used to be able to. Another thing about Rally, if you guys haven't used the skill before, once you use the heal, you get the heal over time on you, and it lasts for 33 seconds. Now, if you refresh that heal before those 33 seconds are up, you get a burst heal from refreshing it, but you get a bigger burst heal the longer you wait. But if you wait until the heal's gone, you don't get the burst heal at all. So refreshing Rally every 25 seconds or so is a really great way to use it. Or if you just find yourself low on health, you can try to stall as long as you can and then just wait for that Rally burst heal. One of the things that you guys may want to keep in mind, especially in PvP using this build, is if you're getting hit by lethal arrows, you're going to want a Purifying Ritual, weapon swap, and then use Rally. Because if you use Rally beforehand, you waste that burst heal because your healing is debuffed so much. Finally, we've got Repentance slotted here as well. Alright, so now let's look at the offensive side of this build. So this is where all your damage will come from. Now, Blazing Shield I am including in the defensive side because it is used more defensively for this build. It can be used offensively if you stack it with the rest of your burst, and the way to do that's pretty simple. You put your shield up, you try to time it, or you look for that incoming attack that's going to set your shield off, and you use your burst right at that time. And if you can time it at that moment, you can stack a lot of different abilities in with your Blazing Shield, and you'll do quite a bit of damage with it. So we're going to switch to the bow. So I said that the bow was a utility weapon for this build, and I meant it was a utility weapon. That's why I don't have Flawless slotted here. The bow is not meant to do damage for this build. The bow is meant to set up your takedown. Now, it is totally possible to take down someone from 3,300 life with this build in just a few seconds, and the reason that you can do that is because of how well these combos work. So I'm going to give you the master combo for this build, and I'll also include some video clips of how to use that combo later on. Alright, so we're looking at Poison Injection first. Now, this is why I picked Poison Injection over Venom Arrow. The interrupt with Venom Arrow is actually really nice, and if you want to use it, go for it. It's still a really great skill, and it's still a great utility skill. But the reason I picked Poison Injection is for that nasty damage over time. Once your opponent's health drops below 15%, that damage over time gets super high, and it gets really deadly for your opponent. And if you're mixing that with other executing abilities, your opponent is quickly in trouble. So how you want to use Poison Injection with this build is you want to shoot your opponent with it just once and just keep that dot on them at all times. Don't use it to deal any kind of real DPS unless you have to stick away from your opponent for some reason. Otherwise, just rely on it for that dot and keep that dot up, because once their health drops, that dot will start stacking with your Executioner to bring your opponent down. Magnum Shot. This skill is fantastic. If you guys have not played around with Magnum Shot, it is the greatest skill in the game. As long as you keep a movable up, Magnum Shot will keep you so mobile. People will not be able to CC you effectively, because you can use Magnum Shot while immobilized and you'll just bounce back. So if a Dragon Knight continues to Talon you all the time, you can just keep hitting him with Magnum Shot. If he throws his Reflect up, that's fine. Throw your immovable up, throw your regen fields down, and just use Magnum Shot. When using Magnum Shot offensively, it sets off an awesome burst with Critical Rush. What you do is you use Magnum Shot when your opponent isn't blocking or they don't suspect it. You just quickly switch to your bow, you use that Magnum Shot, and it'll knock you back, it'll knock them back, it'll make a 12-meter gap between you and them. While you're weapon swapping, continue to back up, and then go for your Critical Rush. Your Critical Rush will deal increased damage based on the distance from your opponent, and they actually buff the damage that does, even though they nerfed the flat damage of Critical Rush. But it will hit really hard because you're backing away from your opponent with Magnum Shot. This is a killer combo, and this can deal quite a bit of damage. And then finally, we have Executioner on the Greatsword side. Now, Executioner is just an all-around great executing skill, just like the name would suggest. And also, it'll make your other Greatsword light attacks and skills hit harder, including your rally, as your opponent's health starts to drop. Little known fact, your rally will actually heal you more if your health drops below 25% and you have Executioner slotted on your bar. And finally, our last offensive skill is Flawless Dawnbreaker, which I don't actually use unless I am clearing out a vampire and I know it's going to kill him and deal around 1500 damage. Then I will use it and I will just, you know, smoke that vampire who's bat swarming too much. Otherwise, I just keep it slotted for that 13% additional damage because that is just great. Just fantastic. Alright, so we're going to take a look at the build in action here. So I'm just entering this fight and I see this level 41. I didn't really want to kill him because he is lower leveled, but then I see the V2 over there, so I take a charge at him thinking he should be my first target. This isn't exactly ideal targeting. It was just how I was playing at that time. I was live streaming, so I didn't want to kill the 41 on stream. But then a third guy shows up and I decide I got to start doing this fight. So I do all my buffs there, and then the first thing I do is I quickly take down the 41. He's the easiest target to take down. I hit him with the basic Magnum Rush combo and he drops pretty quickly. And then I get back behind my rock. So this is good use of positioning here. The whole idea with positioning with this build is to really just give yourself the jump on your opponent. You are much faster than your opponents, especially after that dodge roll when you have your bow out. So I come back around the rock and I find this guy alone, and he just sits there and he tries to block tank me. Not a really great idea when fighting a stamina build and you have a staff equipped, and then the Nightblade comes in and finishes him off. And this guy is also fairly squishy. He's not doing a lot to really try to stop me from killing him. He's just kind of shooting arrows at whatever he can see, and he goes down pretty fast as well. So that little clip there was just a showcase of the firepower of the build and how quickly you can take down unsuspecting opponents. End up getting in a little bit more of a lengthy 2v1 against a sorcerer and a Nightblade. I enter the fight and I see this V1 trying to charge cast his crystal shards as his only skill. So I instantly choose him as my target, knowing that he's not going to be blocking a lot, so it'll be easy to interrupt and take down. And he does go down pretty quickly. And then I start attacking this other sorcerer, and he runs away and Nightblade jumps me. Now that's a moment where I can't stress having a movable up enough, just because if you do get jumped by that by multiple opponents, it's a good chance that they're going to take you down almost instantly. Played off the hill with my Magnum Shot. I know that he's still in combat, and I don't know if he has a bow or not, so I'm sticking behind this tree to make sure that I don't take any unwanted lethal arrows. The Nightblade ends up coming back around the corner with the Sorcerer, and then I have both of them on me, and it's pretty heavy pressure because they're both pretty good players and they deal quite a bit of damage. So I try to go aggressive on the Nightblade here, trying to hit him with a good Magnum Shot combo, but it doesn't end up working, and I find myself pretty low on stamina, and I'm taking quite a bit of pressure from these two at this point. But the Nightblade is going really aggressive, and he's really trying to finish me off, but he's not able to because I'm preemptively keeping that Blazing Shield up. I do, however, let my immovable drop, and I take the knockdown there, and you see the huge impact that has on my resources. So at this point, I'm trying to play really defensively while still being able to take that Nightblade down. I get just the Executioner I need, and then I start dodge casting skills. So for those of you who don't know what dodge casting is, it's casting a skill and then dodge rolling. So you'll still cast the skill, and you'll roll mid-cast, and it allows you to use abilities. So it's a really great defensive way to play if you get yourself in trouble or if you get jumped. So in this clip, I get attacked by a Dragon Knight, and then a Templar shows up just a little bit into the fight. As soon as the Dragon Knight hits me, I did have my movable up preemptively, and it doesn't really do much, and I just start Magnum Shotting out of his talents. Then the Templar comes, and he starts spamming the spears. So of utmost importance in this fight, I need to keep my immovable up, because there's a lot of CC heading my way. Now what you did was you saw me just roll out of the standard there and pull them out of their own standard. I don't really want to sit in that. And it's just a better tactic if I can stay out of all their heavy DPS skills, because I am quite a bit more mobile than them. Squishy, and he's not running a heal, so he goes down pretty quickly to just my passive bow attacks, and I'm left to have this fight against the Dragon Knight, who's blown through a lot of his resources already, and I know that. I activate Empowering Sweep to give me that little bit of tank ability, and I knock him back, charge a heavy attack, and then hit him with a Venom Arrow, and just keep plunking him with arrows, because he doesn't have the resources to keep hitting me or heal himself. This clip here just illustrates how important positioning is when using a build, especially one that's as mobile as mine. So I open up on this Dragon Knight here, and I catch him from stealth, and I actually don't finish him off with any skills. The poison dot gets him as he comes out of mist form. So there's just the Venom Arrow working for you there. So I wait up here. I want to attract a little bit of attention, get some DC guys up here. This Templar comes up to confront me, and I have my Blazing Shield up preemptively, and I'm keeping my Immovable up, and I'm interrupting him while he's using his spear skills, because his block is down while he does that. That's actually something that's super handy when fighting Templars. I notice I'm getting hit by arrows, and I see the guy shooting arrows at me. I quickly plunk a couple arrows at him, and then continue to fight this Templar while he can't hit me. So I'm just moving around this Templar. He's not really hitting me with any skills, because the spears are too easy to dodge with a build that's as mobile as this one. So I'm just waiting for my opportunity to take him down. I see an interrupt there, but I can't actually get the charge because he's sitting on the ledge. So then again, I reset, make sure my buffs are up, and I continue to fight this Templar. I notice that he's starting to run low on his resources because he is spam casting his abilities, and he uses his ultimate Empowering Sweep there as well. So he's sitting there and he's trying to tank me out with his remaining Blazing Shields. I get another knockback and he gets up on the ledge again, which is just no good. So I back out of the fight, noticing that more DC are coming, and I want to pull them up here more to my favor. So I see this sorcerer get up here, and he just starts auto-casting his light attacks on me, which is just not a great idea. I execute him super quickly, and then I'm left to fight this skeleton Sork here. And that was just a little great illustration of how deadly a Magnum Rush combo can be to someone who's unsuspecting. So I charge this Sork, and I notice that he starts to bolt away from me. What I should have done is pulled up the hill to not attract more attention, but I get aggressive, and I go in for the kill, and I do finish him off, but then I notice 3 guys shooting me with arrows, and I back up around the corner. If I had retreated up the hill, I would have been able to line of sight them a lot easier, but in this case, I'm not able to line of sight them very well, and I get in a rather scrappy fight with the guy in the corner there, not going my way due to the low resources and people hitting me from afar, and end up getting killed. A little display of how this build kind of works in a group fight. So DC is just about to jump on this flag, and there are a few of us EP on the hill, so we jump out at them. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to move around a lot in the enemy kind of group. I don't really want to hold still, and I want to pick off targets that are starting to drop health or that are pretty easy targets to take down. After that first kill there, I notice that I am in the back half of their group, and I decide to jump into the middle, and I see a mage that is unsuspecting to me, and I end up getting a really great burst off on him and taking him down super quick there. And I think that just highlights why this build is so effective in group fights. You can find a target even at full health, and if you can just land that burst when they don't expect it, you can take them down so quickly. Into the back of their group after jumping in there, and they all notice me since a lot of my EP friends seem to have died, and I find myself in a sticky situation. I decide I need to get out, and I actually dodge roll Repentance to get out of this. So the Repentance is enough to get me another dodge roll with my regen, and I end up getting out of that fight. Now this short clip here is just a highlight on how if you land your combo properly, even with low resources, you can take someone down pretty quickly. And you see me landing the Magnum Rush combo right there, and he actually gets back up, but he does not heal up, and my Blazing Shield takes him down. I end up losing this fight, but that's just a little example there. And I think the big reason I lose this fight is because I try to focus on the guy who's still attacking me while the Templar picks up his other player instead of interrupting the pickup, which I think would have given me a much bigger edge in this 3v1 here. So I end up trying to tank these guys as much as I can. I'm having a really tough time taking any of them down because they do have a Templar healer with them, and he seems to be pretty on the ball after that first burst. And this last fight here, guys, of this video is just me trying to defend this resource here. I end up jumping in alone, but a few EP come in there with me as well. And this is quite a lengthy fight, and I think this really showcases how long you can sustain yourself if you make yourself a difficult target to hit. And you see me getting good amounts of damage into quite a few of the enemy players there as well. I'm really just kind of rolling around, and I'm trying to execute and trying to crit rush into people to see how much damage I can do to the group as a whole. I'm really just gauging and trying to pick a squishier target. Try to focus a single target down for too long, because when there are this many players around you, if you hold still, they really get tunnel vision, and they really start to focus on you and want to take you down. At this point, a couple EP come in, and this fight starts to get a little bit more even. We do have a Templar that's healing and a DK dropping a ton of AoE and CC there, and you see quite a few of the AD players' health starting to drop. And this is where I just go on an executing spree, and I'm just really taking down anything that's at half health or less. So one of the things you keep in mind with when playing a build like this is that you can really utilize your mobility here. I'm moving around a lot, being that hard target, and I'm moving in between my group and their group. I'm sticking next to my EP players and then quickly splitting myself from them just to confuse my opponents as to who to attack. I don't want to give them a sitting duck target. And then the EP Zerg rolls in and we end up retaking this resource. Alright, there you have it, guys. That is the Blood Knight build with some gameplay. I really hope you guys like the build. I really hope that if you go and you try it, you really enjoy it. You don't have to be a Templar to run a build similar to this. You can do it on any class. If you guys have any questions, please post in the comment section, or you can feel free to try to contact me in-game via in-game mail. As always, like and subscribe if you want to see some more, and feel free to check out my Twitch channel if you guys want to see me play live. Thanks and bye.